we're collecting homeworks, and I'm playing with a fire map. So let's get the homeworks collected. Have we given back the other ones? Are we done with the world of homework?
I think some of the students didn't get their prom set because we still have session on Friday.
Oh, okay.
But they are promised to get all of the prom sets 1 and 2 by the end of next Friday if they want to.
Okay, so now we know the answer to that question. So let's finish adding to here. Instead of bringing up the lecture, I brought up a fire map. But let's just go through what's happening in the next little bit. So we have today's lecture. We have Tuesday's lecture. Between the two of those, I will cover the things about consumer surplus. That's at least the plan. There are 56 slides. I ought to be able to do that in 3 hours. Now gives us a little bit of time to fool around with other stuff. There's plenty of stuff I'd like to go back and talk about. That'll get us even to where we should be at this time in the course. And maybe we're a couple minutes ahead, but we're fine in terms of timing. The review sheet I used last time I taught the course is current. I put in that it now works for 2012. Next Tuesday we have a lecture. Next Thursday, Deirdre's going to conduct a review session, and then we'll have a quiz after that. I'm gone, remember, tomorrow to the energy meetings, next week to command performance with relatives. And so I won't see you on either Friday, and I won't be here next Thursday. Otherwise, I'm around. So I think we have that. We have the second problem set in. We have a little ways to go for the third one, so I wouldn't worry about that yet. I'm going to try to get what do I do here? The tape's come out better if I get this thing a lot more solid. All right, that sounds a little more solid. So today we do consumer surplus, which is there, and we'll let that do its thing. And this is a current fire, and I got an interest in this fire because if I can find it, there's a little tiny reservoir right about in here. If you went and got this page up, by the way, you could manipulate it. You still had a lot of trouble. You blow it up a little bit, and there's a tiny little place right in here. And then if you go about that far, you get to the Blodgett Experiment Station, which the college owns. And a long time ago, I wrote a paper about bark beetles that use data from that experiment station. It's still there. It has some rather nice facilities these days, and we're kind of hoping the fire keeps going that way, not that way. The wind's from the north, so the effort to stop the fires down here around Route 50, where the houses are, there's not much up here. That's about 4 miles to the lake, but you got to top of a ridgeline. Fires go fast up and slow down, so they probably got to stop it up there. This fire was intentionally set. It's up around 100,000 acres. It's normal for California. The abnormal thing is that we build structures up in there. But the normal thing is that we're a fire ecology. And so if we didn't suppress the fires, about 10% of the state would be on fire every single year in the fall. And you'd have, if you went out in the woods, the trees would be further apart, they'd be bigger, there'd be more grass in between, and less fire load. And that's not the way we've managed it. And that's kind of nature managing it back the way she wants it, with a little bit of help from some crazy guy who thought it was a cool idea to set a fire down here. That's my comments on fire. Let's go see some slides. So we read demand curves in two directions, as you well know. And we find it convenient to read demand curves by putting quantity on the horizontal axis and then looking up at the demand curve and saying, all right, so how much would the consumer pay for 2 units or Q units in general? And now we take that point of view and we use it to get a money measure of what a good is worth. So that's our ultimately what we want to do. How much would you be willing to pay WTP for, and I'll talk about a new ski area eventually. How much does a ski area cost? And as an economist, you could say, well, wait a minute, if all the people who might go to it are only willing to pay $10 million and it costs $20 million to build it, then this is a stupid idea. Let's do something else. And that very often is the contribution of an economist in an environmental debate. It's not that I know better than anyone else what will happen to spotted owls or San Joaquin kit fox. I don't have any great insights into that. But I certainly have a great insight into, we have a project, the project is going to cost $20 million, it has benefits of $10 million, and so why are we doing it? And that will stop a large collection of projects that you, if you're an environmentalist, would say that project ought to be stopped. And notice, I don't have to say anything at all about the environment. So one thing you could do if you worked for probably a government agency is you could do your cost-benefit analyses, honestly. And that'd be a big win for the environment. Right? Don't count the benefits 3 or 4 times and the cost of one, stuff like that. You think I'm kidding you? I'm not. That's what they do. So that's where we're going. We want a money measure. We want how much somebody's willing to pay for something. We want it in dollars. Recall, I don't have a utility meter. I don't have a dollar meter either. I can't just take the meter and go point it at people's heads and find out how much they'd be willing to pay or how happy the project would make them. So I've got to find some way to do that. And I'll give a couple of ways before we're done. One set of ways we call revealed preference. I'll look at what they buy, and I'll use the stuff that I'm doing today to say, well, wait a minute, because I have their demand curve, so from that I can work out how much they'd be willing to pay. And then there's another set of methods called stated preference. Basically, you take a microphone, you hold it in front of their face. How much would you be willing to pay to save the spotted owl? And they give you an answer. You multiply by the number of people. And we'll talk about when that sort of thing would work and when it won't work, but that's 3 lectures off. So let's go for basics. We have this total willingness to pay. Sometimes I'll abbreviate it and call it willingness to pay. But if I were good, I would be consistent and always say the words total willingness to pay. I will have consumer surplus, which is something you can calculate very easily. You take the area under a curve. No problem. Then I have some problems with that measure. And I'll explain to you why it's an imperfect measure. And instead, I'll propose a couple of perfect measures, compensating variation and equivalent variation. And it will turn out that compensating and equivalent variations for market goods are very close to the thing that's easy, and for non-market goods could be pretty far away. If you had to ask me, what's the single hardest piece of microtheory I will teach you, it's equivalent and compensating variation. We'll see how well we get it. Then we have the problem of adding over consumers. We do it differently for private and public goods. That'll be okay. And then we can discuss a different set of contexts, willingness to accept and willingness to pay. Willingness to pay sounds pretty obvious, right? How much would you be willing to pay to save the spotted owl? But how much would I have to pay you not to kill the spotted owl is, of course, willingness to accept. And they're both valid questions. One's just easier to say than the other. That's an overview. should take us 2 times. So we got the demand curve, the amount that will be purchased as a function of price, right? Q is a function of P. And we have the inverse demand curve, and this is what we work off of. The price consumers will pay for the next unit of the good as a function of the number of units of the good already consumed. That's a tight statement, right? How much I will pay for the next unit of the good, but it depends upon whether the next unit is going to be the 3rd unit, the 5th unit, or the 100th unit, right? That's what the demand curve does. It slopes down. So here I've just stated it carefully. And what we say is that P of Q, the point on the demand curve, is the willingness to pay for the next unit, accurately, the marginal willingness to pay. And that's just the number on the demand curve. What would you pay for the next unit? You already have 4 units. Look at your demand curve. Find out what demand of 5 is. I'm done, right? That's the demand curve. Well, demand curves slope down. That's empirical. There are examples where demand curves slope up. It's rare. Empirically, they slope down. And when you think of something like water, you ask, well, how much would you pay for the first pint of water? Suppose you're outside there on a hot day, and you had to buy water, and there was no good alternatives like juice or anything like that. And what would you pay for the first pint that you get for a day? A lot of money? Ridiculously large amount of money, perhaps? Yeah. And yet you know how much would you be willing to pay for the next unit of water, given that you already have as much as you wanted, in essence, right? You already bought water for showers, and you bought like 10 or 20 gallons there, and for a toilet, and for some outdoor stuff. And so how much would you be willing to pay for the next unit of water right now? Pennies? So demand curves have this problem, that you can have a good that you absolutely need, water, and yet when you look at what's the marginal willingness to pay for water, it's a tiny, tiny number. Would we conclude from that water's useless and costs nothing and you shouldn't worry about it, and that you wouldn't be willing to pay, your total willingness to pay for water would be very small? No, that would be a funny thing to conclude. So how do we get out of that? We have this new idea called total willingness to pay. And in this idea, we ask, suppose we sold it to you little bits at a time. So suppose we sold you 1 unit at what you'd be willing to pay for the first unit. That's a big number, right? That's a point high up on your demand curve. We have the demand curve, I think, on the next slide. Then I ask you what you're willing to pay for the next pint. It's going to be a lower amount, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, all the way out to the 9th pint. So if I sold it to you 1 pint of water at a time, and you didn't know you'd get another one. So each time you thought, oh, I have 2, I have an opportunity to buy 3, but not 4, just 3. What would I pay for 1 more, right? P of 3. Then your total willingness to pay for water, the most amount of money I could get out of you to pay for Q units of water is what I would get if I could sell it to you in this 1 unit as a time way. We define that as the total willingness to pay. Let's see if we get a picture. Okay, here we have a picture. So here I have a demand curve, right? And on my demand curve, if I asked what would you pay for the first unit of water, and you just might get only 1, you would answer $60. Then if I managed to sell it to you for $60, I would have actually gotten $60. That's the green area here. These things are 1 wide, which makes this work easily. Then I could do the same thing again. Oh, it's nice you had 1 unit, but guess what? Would you like to buy another unit of water? Just one more. And say, yeah, I'm going to pay 50. I get $50 out of you. That's the blue area. I do this again and again out to, say, 4 units, for argument's sake. How much money have I gotten out of you? Well, 60 plus 50 is 110, 150, what was that, 30, 180. And I guess I want this one too, 200. So your total willingness to pay out to here is approximately 200. And that's the idea of total willingness to pay. It's the area under the demand curve. Now, I know that about 99% of you have taken calculus. I think there's just a couple who haven't. So if I made this approximation instead of in terms of 1, I made it in half, quarter, eighth, etc., making it smaller and smaller, what would I actually have done? What? Yeah, but what is this thing I'm producing by taking this sum and making the net, the width of the boxes small? Yeah, it's literally the definition of the integral, right? And this is a lower Riemann sum. And as far as we're concerned, if I ask you what's the area under here, and you draw boxes and add them up, that's fine by me. If you say, it's a trapezoid. It starts at 70, and it ends at 20, and it's 5 wide. So 70 plus 20 is 90, divided by 2 is 45, and multiply by 5, and that's the area. That's fine with me, too. And mostly, if I'm asking you, I'm likely to say, what is the area? You're likely to take your pencil and just scribble. Say, it's the area under the curve, the stuff I've scribbled. And all of those answers are fine by me. This is an economics course, not a calculus course. But what we're doing here is we're finding the area under the curve, and we've exactly reproduced the argument for the definition of an integral using a Riemann sum. That's what we've done. So the area under the demand curve is the total willingness to pay, and you just find the area out however many units you want. It corresponds to the thought experiment. Suppose I could sell it 1 item at a time. So here's something is very dear for the first item, costs very little for the last item, and if I ask, suppose I wanted to know how much you'd be willing to pay for all the items, you would add up all the boxes, and you get a presumably reasonably large number. So that's total willingness to pay. Next, we have the concept of consumer surplus. Pretty simple. Total willingness to pay minus amount paid. Now all I have to do is find the price on the diagram. And so here I have diagram. Here I have Q. Total willingness to pay is blue and green. This is the price. The amount paid is price times quantity, right, is blue. Notice areas are amounts of money. This is dollars per unit. This is units. So this is dollars. That's the units for the area here. The green is consumer surplus. Total willingness to pay minus amount paid is consumer surplus. That's the definition of consumer surplus. Now let's ask about what happens to willingness to pay as you get more stuff. Total willingness to pay. So clearly, the total willingness to pay for Q units is this blue area, right? Everything under the demand curve out to Q. The total willingness to pay for Q plus N units is the blue plus the green. And so the willingness to pay for N more units after I have Q units is the green. And we'll need this later on. This is going to come back to us maybe a lecture and a half, maybe 2 lectures from now, maybe 4 lectures from now. So we need later on to be able to not only tell the willingness to pay, but how willingness to pay increases as quantity increases. And you just increase the area under, that's all. So I want to build a project. I want to build a bridge. Yeah. So how should I think about building a bridge? Well, an easy way to think about building a bridge, I'll keep it in this framework, is to think of building a bridge as lowering the price of getting across the bay. Without the bridge, you had to pay the ferry, and it took you an hour. and your time was worth something. When they built the bridge, instead of paying the ferry, you had to pay the bridge toll, which was less, which actually was supposed to pay for the bridge, and it would only take you 10 minutes, because in those days it only took 10 minutes to get across the bridge. That's because there weren't any people here. So you could think of building a bridge as lowering the price of going to the city. You can think of most projects, not all, but most projects in that way. I, at one point, got interested in the potential for a ski area. The ski area was to be in Mineral King, which has now been included in, what's the park? It's not Kings Canyon, it's Sequoia National Park. It's the very southern part of it. There's a proposal to build a ski area down there. And what would the ski area have done? The ski area would have been closer to LA than the other decent ski areas, and so it would have lowered the cost of skiing, because the cost of getting to the ski area could be a good fraction of the total cost of going skiing. So you could think of it as lowering the price of going skiing. I wonder, what's this worth? What's like a new dam? Why do you build a dam? You build a dam to make power. Why do you want to make power? You want to make power because the price of electricity with the dam will be less than the price without. That's the benefit to the consumers. So the cost of the thing, but the benefit to the consumers is straightforwardly, without the dam, we would have to do something else, and the price of electricity would be higher. With the dam, we get some more cheap hydropower, the price of electricity is lower. Right? Now let's go ahead and ask the question again. Suppose I want to build a project, and it's a good project in the sense, I've done it backwards. All right, we'll do it that way. It's a bad project. It raises the price of something, and then we'll take it backwards, all right? So let's narrate it this way, and then we'll narrate it the sensible way in a second. So I got a project. Something I'm going to do makes the price go from P to P prime. Perhaps I'm going to add a tax. That would be good, right? I'm going to tax something. Does that make the price go up? That's a better example. So we're going to tax oil. We're going to make the price go up. We do our supply and demand diagram. We find out the price before was P, the price after is P prime. What's this worth to the consumers? All right, well, we can find that out. So let's start out with P, right? The price is P, and let's add these things up. And if you don't see this, you could just write on top of the slide or redo it. So at P, we have this big amount, Q, right? Consumer amount paid. Let's do that one first. At this price, this quantity, red, blue, right, are the total amount of money you pay. What's the area under the demand curve, the total willingness to pay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the boxes. What's the consumer surplus? Everything above here, 1, 2, 3 boxes. 2 types of yellow and 1 type of green. Was green, yellow, and it says orange. Close enough. Now let's do the same thing again. Price is higher. It's P prime. Now what happens? Quantity, Q prime. Amount paid, blue. Area under the demand curve, green, yellow, blue. Consumer surplus, green, yellow. And what's the difference between the two? That's the interesting thing. Just this little triangle, right? That's it. And we'll get very interested in this little triangle. If that little triangle weren't there, then nothing bad would have happened to the consumer. Consumer surplus before and after would be the same. That little triangle is the measure of what bad thing happened to the consumer, money terms, because the price went up. And we'll give it names depending on where we are. Right now, it's just a lost consumer surplus from a price increase. And you can run the whole thing backwards, right? Here I am originally PQ, and I build a wonderful project. I come down to the lower one, so I go from P prime to P. Now, my consumer surplus expands to be the top 3 triangles. How much did the consumer surplus change? Went up like this. And that's a measure. It's a money measure of how good the project was. You can run the story in either direction. So let me take it from the top since I see a worried look out there. Okay. Here's the story from the top. Got this demand curve. The area under the demand curve out the quantity is total willingness to pay. That's the most money you can get from a consumer for the thing you're looking at. But the consumer did pay for it. They paid price times quantity. So total willingness to pay, what they actually paid, minus what they actually paid, is a money measure of what it's worth to them. I do the story twice and find out how much consumer surplus changes when I change price, and in this case, it'll change quantity. And that is what building the new project is worth, or what the tax cost them. Either way, you want to look at it. Yeah. To the consumer. This project, remember, just lowers the price from P prime to P. Yeah? Consumer's willing to pay this much extra. Look at it that way. Here, I used to be at the high price. Quantity gets pushed out. What's the additional willingness to pay? But how much does the consumer have to pay? The red. So that's the addition to consumer surplus. That's the other way of saying it. Okay? So now we have a way to take a demand curve and go from our demand curve to some money measure of what this thing is worth to a consumer. We had many consumers, surprise, we'll multiply by the number of consumers. So now we could find from a demand curve, we could presumably find the value to the consumers of a tax. How much consumer surplus did they lose because of the tax? We could find how much a project is worth. I built a project, it made skiing closer. What was that worth to the consumers? Above and beyond what they had to pay. And that's surplus and price. So why is this not a perfect answer? Well, let's go back to the story. The underlying story is you get sold, you can really tell depending on where my voice is. Yeah.